Derek Goff has told me some information about who he handed stuff to, and one of them is a guy called Neil Spring, who had connections with Oxford University. Yes, and he's supposedly given Neil Spring some of the audio tapes of Goff talking to the NATO guy. But I think Goff says that they went missing from Neil Spring's locker, so he lost those audio tapes. So did you have some correspondence with Neil Spring, David?
I'm assuming Neil Spring lives in South Wales, close to Derek Goff, right. Or to, David Coggins, because I wasn't sure how they got to know each other.
Right.
Anyway, I think it's because he lives in South Wales and close by. Yeah, so Oxford University had, a year or two ago, formed a new UFO group, and they had speakers and talks, and they invited Graham Birdsall to come and speak, who was the past editor of the Quest International UFO magazine and director of Quest International. And at some point in the proceedings, Neil Spring apparently took Graham to one side and whispered something to him like, I think you ought to know about this. Mm-hmm. So he was acquainting Graham of his knowledge from those audio tapes, thinking Graham might do something with it. And I think at that time, when he got back to Yorkshire, to Leeds, Tony Dodd had actually left and resigned his position with Quest International. So he thought, I would be the appropriate person to pass this message on and a phone number. So I did ring him, and with the hope that he would furnish me with a copy of these tapes. And he referred to this third person, which is obviously this army chap that you've identified, and said it's more than his life's worth to pass them over, which is a bit strange when he's already had them and David Coggins has already had access to them. He wouldn't give me the contact number of this military guy, or even David Coggins, because he didn't know that I didn't know David Coggins at the time, which I didn't. So
I think you and I are both of the same mindset, that we don't make a judgment as to the true motives or the reasons behind this. We're looking at the evidence. All right. Now,
yes.
The knee-jerk response is, whoever's doing this, it's an absolute evil thing, which it appears to be on the surface. It's not benevolent in any way. Now, there's quite a large school of thought in this field of ufology, which is that no non-human intelligence would ever harm another intelligence, shall we say.
Yes.
So they're all benevolent, in other words. And this is put forward by people such as Dolores Cannon and Stephen Greer. Stephen Greer is also of that same mindset.
Yeah.
Now, I don't make a judgment as to why they're doing this and what the ultimate reason is, but Greer in particular has been making noises recently about the reasons for this. Just tell us a bit about that, David.
Yes, so he's issued a paper. It was issued on 31st of August, so very recently. I haven't read the whole paper. I've only read the extracts, which has been circulating around in the last week on the internet. And he's, I agree with some of his comments in the sense that he's postulating that this unseen government and the industry and the money, financial institutions and the oil barons and all the rest of it are leading up to some false flag case where they might do things to replicate what the ETs are doing, to put the fear of God into everybody, to make the general populace think we've got a threat from an outside source off planet.
Yeah. So they might fabricate an alien threat.
Yes.
And so his hypothesis is that anything that seems to be evil connected with unexplained UFO type phenomenon is all a psyop.
Yes,
that's what he's saying.
He's saying that the evil people are the government agencies, or whoever these people are, or orchestrating and ordering this sort of activity to fool the public and the media.
My response to that would be, well, okay, why have they got a NATO group being set up, which is covert apart from the one whistleblower that we've had, to tidy up after human mutilation cases? Why does the military need their own group to keep it secret and keep it covered up and take away the evidence and seal off the area and all the rest of it? Why do they need that group? Just look at the case on Filey Beach. Is Stephen Gray saying that the military did that seal?
Yeah.
That was just so happened to be found one morning by a couple of people walking past on Filey Beach.
Yeah.
And there are cases all over the world as well.
Yes, well, there's a case Tony reported, and it's in his book, on beaches, adjacent beaches in the Orkney Islands in 1994, 93, over 30 seals found, with all decapitated, but that cut through the same vertebrae joint in the neck.
And I mean, I've just think of the Dalby Forest cases. Is he saying then that the US military is running around Dalby Forest or acquiring animals from all different sources? Some of them farm animals. You've got sheep, you've got, well, there was a donkey, there's a fox, a badger, all with the same sort of similar injuries in a pile in Dalby Forest. And the military are doing that deliberately so that someone might just by accident come across them and then tell Tony Dodd, who several years later might just so happen to write about it in his book, and then we might talk about it in an interview just to scare the public to think that that ETs are evil. Is that contrived or what?
Yes.
Is it not more likely that this is some unexplained phenomenon that is going on in the UK and other parts of the world?
I mean, Stephen Gray is postulating that some of these are done by the military, replicating animal mutilations and abductions, and I think to myself, how can the military? I don't think they've got the expertise. I mean, thinking of what Professor Fremont has said, that there'd have to be more skilled than Professor Tony Fremont, and how many people in the ranks wearing a uniform in the United States Army or the Air Force or even the Navy have got this expertise to replicate what the aliens are doing to animals or even human beings. So I don't think his reasoning stands up to scrutiny, to be honest.
Putting forward this argument that all ETs would have to be benevolent, that is possibly some kind of psyop in itself, in that, in my view, that at some level the NSA or whoever have had some contact with the groups that are possibly doing this, and maybe even have knowledge of it. I mean, Goff said that they had advanced warning of what day there was going to be UFO activity and would specifically monitor the situation on certain days. They knew when mutilations were more likely than others.
Right.
They knew which days. So that suggests to me there's been some communication at some level. And going to the Dan Sherman interview, he also alleged that they were in cahoots to some degree. I mean, we don't know exactly what that is, but perhaps this is a way of them, I don't know, watering down or playing down the seriousness of what's really going on. What are your thoughts on that, David? Do you think it's an entirely separate thing that they just haven't got control over?
It's possible. I think maybe some historical deals have been struck with maybe one group of aliens. I mean, what we all keep forgetting, including me, there's not just one alien species out there visiting Earth. There might be 30 or more. I mean, Tony thought there were more than 30. So they've all got slightly different agendas, and they might need the organs and tissue and the blood from lots of animals, and the same for a number of human beings, to do what they need to do, which might even be, in the long term, be for the good of us all. I mean, that's conjecture on my part, but there must be a purpose and a reason to keep on doing this. And I think that the authorities in the 50s or wherever any deals may have been struck, the aliens have possibly reneged a bit on the promises, or we may have as well, exchanging information, technologies which would be useful to us and American.
I mean, clearly, if the Gough story is entirely true, which I suspect it is, then they haven't. Our own military, NATO, whichever group's in charge of it, haven't got control of it. Otherwise, they wouldn't need a group to go around running after
sweeping up the mess,
yes, and then hiding it from the public.
Yeah.
So they've not got a handle on it.
No.
Which they would definitely. We know that they've covered up on animal mutilation, and as Tony says in his book, this is an even higher level cover up.
Yes.
For obvious reasons, I suppose.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't agree with covering it up, and I don't think you do either.
No.
But people in positions of power, they probably wouldn't want to share that information.
No. I mean, Stevie Greer is a very persuasive, strong character.
Mm-hmm.
Quite bullish, in my opinion. And, you know, he's dictatorial a bit, perhaps, like you follow my line or you don't type of thing, you know. And he's got his own agenda anyway. He runs tours which earns him an income for taking people on contacts and sessions to meditate at some place in the States, which he regularly uses, and which he charges, I guess, quite a few $100s a throw for that.
They try and make telepathic contact with extraterrestrials.
Yes, and they get lights responses and so on, and people get excited about that. So he doesn't want to show the aliens in a bad light, because that would frighten people off going on to these special tours of trips and meditation and making contact with the aliens, or a particular group of aliens which might be quite friendly towards us earthlings in that particular location. I don't know, but he's trying to put this overall umbrella up that they're all not here to do us any harm, and they're all here for our benefit. And it may be that for our benefit they have to take so many animals and all this blood and guts, if you like, even from human beings, to something to do with preserving our planet and us as a human being, the human race, in the future. So it might be sacrifices, people might say, have to be made for the good of the rest of us. And also they want to preserve this planet. So when you think that the United States government or whoever they are have killed all those people on 9/11, London bombings and all these other atrocities, as you know, to further their cause to enter a war some other country in the Middle East or whatever, for them to agree or be happy to sit back and let a few men in the street or women in the street, including children, to be abducted, never to be seen again, and mutilated as well, begs the question. And a lot of ufologists and people who I'm close to, and I realise what we're doing now is going to upset them a little bit, which I'm sorry I'm having to do that by making this documentary, but I think it has to be told and has to be said. And I can have sympathy why certain people who are quite close to me, who have been investigating animal mutilations, have got into that and done so because they've had interaction personally with ETs over many years, and members of their family have. And because this is happening, it's a very unsettling thought to think that the next time they take me, I'm not coming back, or they're going to mutilate me or a member of my family. So I can appreciate and understand the antipathy to people who have had that association with ETs, which I haven't had, to be anti the prospect and the acceptance of human beings being treated like the animals in the field. You see what I mean? And it does divide the camps in the ufology, and as you've said, it's often a step too far. It clearly is for Linda Moulton Howe, with all her vast experience and information she has upon Earth files, was a pioneer in bringing the animal mutilation cases and information to the public domain. You know, bless her heart, she did a tremendous job and still is. But then she stops at this point of non-acceptance of the human element. And you have to ask the question, why is she doing that? Has she been warned off and said that if you want to continue doing what you're doing with coast to coast and all the rest of it, you've got to not involve or mention or talk about human mutilations? Otherwise you're out of business, lady. I can hear them threatening. She's been threatened. She told me and Robert one day, we were in Wiltshire, she'd had a gun pointed in her face to threaten her because she was already overstepping the mark a bit, even with the animal stuff. So that's a clue to me that, you know, if she's getting threatened about her information she was divulging and promulgating on the internet about animals and all her talks and her books and all the rest of it, something stopped her.